I don't know if those are on.
Right.
That's the head.
Who's this?
Want me to go ask him to come in?
Well, he would be filming, but we're not.
On here. There he is.
You're on, you're just on live.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of what we figured. Thank you, Don. Well, let's get going. Call the special meeting of the Lincoln Park City Council to order. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, so I can have roll call, please.
Councilpersons Breeding. Here. Higgins.
Present.
Kelsey.
Here.
Parkinson.
Here.
Ross. Here. Salcido.
Here.
And Mayor Carnes.
Here. So the purpose of our meeting tonight is to hold city manager candidate interviews. We have a total of 3 that we will be interviewing this evening. To start things off, we have the person that's been at the helm of our selection so far, James Fettorino. So James. Thank you very much. It's probably the wrong one. Is that one for me? You can clean this thing out.
Yeah.
All right, I got it.
You got it? Okay.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, council members, for working through this process. It's a long process to go through a selection of a city manager, and one of the most important that you're going to do of all the business as council members. I'll go over a couple of points, and then we'll get right into the interview. You have a packet in front of you, and the packet should have a cover memo from me dated January 9th, and then it's followed by 3 sets of interview sheets. The interview sheets have the questions along with a scoring methodology in the right-hand column. It's pretty straightforward. I would encourage you to utilize the scoring methodology because it does help in the discussion phase. This is your decision, and you can base it on any criteria that you think is most appropriate. So to me, I'm not going to suggest that you have to hold to a tight score and compare each other's scores, but the scores certainly allow you to engage in a discussion and focus for each of the points that we'll be testing for through the questions. And the measuring factors, the things that are in bold on the interview sheet, come from the process that we went through to identify what you want in your next city manager. My suggested questioning of the members is that City Council ask the questions, so I would ask that the mayor start by asking the first question, which allows the candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves as part of the answer to that question, so I won't be introducing them in any way. They will just sit and be prepared to answer the first question from the mayor. Then I think we're going to go to Councilmember Salcido as the next question asker. So you would take question 2, Councilmember Parkinson, question 3, and then we'll come around to question 4, Councilmember Higgins, and then come back through. The mayor will be skipped. The mayor will ask the last question also. So that is how the questions would be asked of the candidates. Any questions from members of council or the mayor on the questioning of the candidates? We're going to try and stay to approximately 50 minutes per candidate. If there is time remaining at the end and you're at 40 minutes and you have an additional question that you wish to ask, that would be permissible. I would just ask that you ask the ones that we have structured first, and then if there's time at the end, you could ask additional. Please be very aware I've included in the packets questions that aren't lawful to ask and the types that we would want to avoid. If through the question and answer you get to 55 minutes, we may not have additional answers or questions to be asked towards the end. We want to be respectful to the candidates in terms of giving them each the same amount of time, but I won't be ultra vigilant at the 51st minute. But you do want to be aware, so you may see me raise my hand if we go to 55 or 58 minutes. that the candidates be asked to close. Finally, at the end of the interview process, you'll have gone through approximately 3 hours of interviews. That's a lot of information to consume. I'm open to any way that you would like to facilitate a discussion of the candidates, but you also have a meeting on a week from Tuesday, which would be also an appropriate time where you can engage in conversation about the candidates if you prefer at that time to digest what you've heard. It's often, I've seen it done both ways, but sometimes it's difficult to have that conversation immediately after. Sometimes there's some reflection. Also, for the candidates, I'll tell each of them, but for you, this is being recorded, so you can go back and see the candidates again, which I think is an advantage. It's not being played live in respect to making sure that the candidates couldn't see other candidates' performance before have an opportunity to interview. And with that, if there are any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them, or we're ready for our first interview. Oh, one more thing. I will be escorting the candidates in and out to start the process.
Okay, are they required to sit there, or can they go to the podium if they like, or?
They're not required to sit here or go to the podium. They can be whatever's comfortable to them. I think.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, you might wish to indicate why the council president won't be asking questions tonight. That she has laryngitis and is under the weather, but she wants to be here to participate. And the audience at home may wonder why council president isn't speaking.
Inquiring minds wants to know. All right. Good. But she recognizes the importance of these interviews, so we appreciate her being here tonight. James, I think that we are set to go.
Can I ask, do you need for me to talk directly into the microphone, or can I just?
In order for the recording to pick you up, it needs to go directly into the microphone.
My only concern is, okay, this
Or go to the podium.
it's true confessions. That's what I'm going to do. There was a friendly family Thanksgiving football game. I should not have participated, and yet I did. So I have a torn rotator cuff, and so when I hold it.
Oh, jeez, that's not good. Yep.
Hence my first question to James was whether it was appropriate to be at either spot. So
I appreciate that.
whatever you're comfortable.
Absolutely.
The important question is, did you win the game?
My side did.
Okay, starting off, we have Karen L. Folks, and this is where we're at, about 6:09. Now, we have your background material in front of us, but would you please begin by reviewing your professional career path and your career goals? And please identify what specifically draws you to want to work with the City of Lincoln Park.
Absolutely. I was born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, went to Michigan State University, have already met somebody from Ohio State, and it was a little tense, I'm just going to say. But I then also went to Thomas M. Cooley Law School, and then embarked on a journey actually with municipalities, and I started with the city of Flint, and I worked there for 6+ years and had an offer to go into a private firm, something I'd never done before, and they were a private firm that actually did much of the city's work, particularly employment law, which is something that I did for a fair number of years. And so I went to Neal Stewart. I began to receive some phone calls from city employees indicating that they very much wanted me to come back because of some dynamics and issues that were on the city's plate. And so ultimately, they brought me back, and I became the chief the chief assistant city attorney, and soon, apparently, they engaged in a recall of the mayor, and following very close on the heels of that, they actually had the state come in, I should say, the review team. And so it became, the city of Flint became the first city of its size in the United States to actually go into emergency financial management. With that, we had the city attorney who actually walked off the position, didn't know exactly where the deputy was. I jumped in, and because they were trying to finish up the budget, and they had nothing from the city attorney's office, so I sat down with the budget director, the city administrator, and said, I can turn this department around and save you money. And so I put together a reorganization plan, which ultimately would save the city very close to $3 million, went and presented it to the council, and then went to the city administrator with 5 names of people that they could easily hire, any one of which would be just fantastic as the new chief legal officer for the city of Flint. 2 weeks later, I got a call to come down, and they said, I'm sure those are great people, but we want you. So I became the chief legal officer for the city of Flint, and carried it through its emergency, and shortly thereafter then became the CEO of a relatively complex nonprofit that had many programming areas. And once again, I got a call actually from somebody from the state treasurer's department asking about Joyce Parker, because she had listed me as a reference, and I gave them my very candid opinion. She is just outstanding. And the next thing I knew, actually a couple of months later, I got a call from her, and she asked me, what are you doing? And I said, why do you ask? And she said, I need you. And so then I came down and worked with her with the city of Ecorse. And you've got some of the things that we encountered and we addressed with the city of Ecorse. And I actually became the city administrator as well as the city attorney for the city of Ecorse. And she was actually designated in, I think, at least 2 other locations as a financial manager, and so I would hold the fort down, as it were, in her absence. And she eventually went to the city of Allen Park, and they were looking for a city administrator, and she encouraged me to apply. I applied along with I don't know how many others, and because she has a strong belief in the local government representative type of process, she left the decision to the council, and the council chose me to come in as their city administrator. So you can see that I worked with them for a period of time. I have done consulting work at various periods. You can probably see that more recently. Even though I was on a bit of the sidelines, I've worked with Ogama County just within the last about 6-7 weeks. But I've also worked with the city of Saginaw and some nonprofit organizations, as well as Mott Community College in various projects. And then more recently, I worked with the county of Cass, which sits on the Indiana border, and I was their county administrator, and I think that probably is about as much as you want for that question.
Okay, Councilman Salceda?
Yes, thanks for coming today, Ms. Folks.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Met you earlier, it was nice talking to you, and glad you're here. All right, based on your research and understanding of the city, What do you believe are the most important opportunities and challenges for Lincoln Park in the near term, and how would you approach these?
I not only had the opportunity to have a tour of the city, but also it really was a great idea, and I was so thankful that so many of the folks that work for this great organization took the opportunity to come and talk with us. I'm afraid that I probably did more of the questioning than they did, but it gave me a glimpse of what some of the issues are. And there's no two ways about it. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Lincoln Park has a number of critical issues. But one of the things that I really heard through all of the articulations of issues is that there is a feeling of being overwhelmed. Because there are so many things competing for your dollars, it is difficult to determine what your priorities should be, because everything is screaming, "Fix me now." And I understand that, been there. One of the things that I think has worked extremely successfully with the last three organizations that I've mentioned, that would be eCourse, Allen Park, and more recently with Cass County. I have done community engagement pieces. It's everything from strategic planning that would involve not only our governance body here and the internal key leadership staff, but it would also include business leaders and other stakeholders. And one of the reasons I have done this in the past is because of exactly what we're talking about here, this sense of being overwhelmed. When we realize that a significant amount of the dollars that we receive and we are stewards of to use in the best way possible to solve the problems and the issues that are on our plate actually come from our community, one of the best things that I have found you can do is to actually conduct some community engagement pieces. And like I said, I've been fairly successful in having very large turnouts with that. And what happens is you have a community that gets an opportunity not just for input, but they are listened to, they are heard, and they get to help prioritize all of the issues that are on our plate. And so that is truly one of the strategies that I would use. It helps us determine how we're going to proceed over the next number of years. You know, I have in front of me somewhere, as a matter of fact, just, I might as well send these around. Two different things. With Cass County, I actually brought in an outside vendor to do strategic planning. They completed that by June of 2018. And what I have here are three things that I just want you to just glance at, because I want you to see a part of the work that I've done. We did bring in an outside vendor to help with the strategic plan, but what you'll see is a couple of short months later, we did an update. And this update does not actually even capture everything that was accomplished. But I want you to see that we began tracking it. We didn't put it on the shelf. We actually used it as our bright, shining North Star to help guide the city. The second thing that you're going to see in here is I then put together what I call an implementation action plan. So I took all of the goals, worked with the key department heads, and what we filled in is what are the strategies, what are the activities that have to happen to deliver on the goals that have been decided and adopted by the council. The third thing you're going to see is a single paper. I sat down with the finance director, and what we did is we determined what our priorities were. We determined where the dollars could come from and what we would strategize as those first number of activities. So that's all in here. The one other thing is, even though each of the community engagement pieces that I did, E-Course, Allen Park, and Cass County, teed up differently. Each of them did it slightly differently. Cass County, I'm just going to show you an outcome. I branded it, we marketed it, it was hugely successful, and I'm just going to start these, just so that
Well,
you
if
can...
you give it to James, and then we would review that after the interview process is over.
All right? And,
question?
yeah, and so that's basically how I would get started, yes.
Councilman Parkinson?
What do you consider as an essential in a relationship between city manager and the city council, and how do you facilitate a productive relationship with the city council?
Communication. Communication, communication. You know, in real estate, they say location, location, location. In a city manager and governance body, it is communication, communication, communication. And so I think transparency in what we do and how we're doing it is critical, and having communication systems in place that work for everybody. If it's texts, if it's emails, whatever would work, that's what I actually do.
Along with a little respect?
Oh, that goes hand in glove, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Let's, Councilman Higgins, if you would go to question number 3 on the first page.
If selected as the city manager, please tell us how you would approach building trust and respect with employees and the community.
That's huge. And almost every community I've been in, that is a central issue. And that's one of those issues that you can't exactly hit head on. And by that I mean, you can't go to everybody and say, hey, trust me. You have to develop strategies and stick with those strategies so that ultimately the outcome is trust and mutual respect. And so some of the things that I have done have not only been the communication, and the absolute respect. And the other thing I'm going to throw in there too is oftentimes there is confusion as to who makes the decisions. It is abundantly clear that the governance body makes the decisions. The city manager will tee up options for you, but you make the decisions. And I recognize that, I applaud that, I respect that, and I implement that. And so I think one of the things that I have done is I have held one-on-one meetings with the key leadership, and I do that at a minimum once a month. Sometimes I do it every other week. Same thing with elected officials. Typically, we have a once-a-month meeting. Actually, I oftentimes do a brown bag is what I do with that. And we have decided on various topics, and so each month maybe there is a specific topic, and it's getting information out and shared. Also, the community, actually, let me back up. Typically, within the first 90 days that I am on the job, there are some key things that I do. Relationship building is critical, any which way you cut it. So one of the first things that I would be doing is putting together some sort of a schedule so that I could meet with each of you one-on-one. I want to know what you see as the critical issues. I want to know when you took your oath of office, what did you hope to accomplish? What do you want me to help you accomplish? That would be something I'd want to talk with you about. I also then meet one-on-one with key leadership, doing the same thing. And then after we have done that, and we look at some of the standing committees and groups, be they the Chamber of Commerce, be it your DDA, be it, I don't know if you have a Corridor Improvement Authority, but any one of those, that's what I would do, is sit down and talk with them. I want to know where they're coming from. Your Economic Development Corporation, that's critical to me. That forms the engine for vibrancy. But then after that, I am out there and establishing some relationships with some of your key business people so that we can begin to develop a much wider expanse of a team, if you will. And then the one last thing that I would mention is in certain situations, for instance, with Cass County, they had a vacant historic courthouse. And so what I did is I held a series of town halls. And it was to bring in experts to talk about, from a monetary perspective, what are some of the solution pathways that would be available to us, and then actually promote a community discussion on all of that. So those are some of the ways in which ultimately I think we build and rebuild trust and mutual respect.
Okay. Councilwoman Ross, fourth question, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Foltz, for being here tonight.
Absolutely.
Please describe in detail your approach to municipal budgeting, including the process you will use to prioritize funding needs and communicate important budget objectives to the elected officials, staff, and community.
I only had a chance to talk with Lisa for just a little bit of time, but I'm excited over the fact that she has been your finance director for the last 12 years and has really anchored your budget process. Now, as far as a budget process, what I have promoted in each of the places that I go, and you may be already doing some version of this, I like to start probably a good 4 to 5 months before the due date. And so packages go out and to the leadership and with a date where they are to be returned. And then what we do is the finance director and myself would sit down with each of the department heads to take a look at what they have put in place as their desired budget for the following year. And we would talk through it, make sure we understand it, and where there are concerns, we would see if there was a way in which to cut back in certain areas or promote one thing over another. And so do that, and then ultimately what I have done is, and I call them budget hearings, and what I do is, and I recognize it takes a fair amount of time for each of the council individuals, but what I do is we set aside typically a week, or we do it over almost a 2-week period of time, whatever we can schedule. And so it is after internally we have shaved as much as we think we can shave at this point. And you will see some comparisons on the proposed budget, but then we will take it department by department. The department director comes in and will talk through their budget and talk about why there is the importance for various line items, initiatives, what they see on the horizon that absolutely has to be funded. It is the ability for then the council to ask questions, clarify, and see if there are places where we can shave, if at all possible, or look at innovative strategies. So that typically is the process that I use, and the budget hearings have been really very successful. The councils and the commissioners with Cass County have really appreciated that, because you get a better sense of some of those items, and you're not looking at them in a vacuum. It fits within a larger strategy, and you get to hear about that. Second thing that I'm going to say is I do rely upon my finance director. And typically, we talk, in my experience, just about every day, several times a day. But what I like to do is I like to sit down with the finance director, typically on a Friday morning, and say, exactly where are we? So that we are really keeping tabs on what is happening and how close to the budget we are sticking. I think that is critical. And then something else that you're probably already doing, but at least once a month, there is a finance report so that you can see the actuals to budget and see what percentage of the budget we have used at this particular juncture, just to see if we are on track, and to give you some tools so that you, in your position as oversight for the budget, have a better way in which to track the budget. So those are some of the things.
Okay. Councilman Kelsey, the fifth question, please.
Yes. Thank you for coming here, obviously.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Real quick, do you need to drink water or something, or do you want to get some water before we go on to the next question? I mean, I know we've...
I don't know, what is the next question?
Well, it's not that hard. I'll give it to you. How's that? I just wanted to...
No, go ahead.
Sometimes when you're... Okay. Please describe your skills in the area of fiscal stewardship, and what techniques have you followed in the past to manage government funds effectively?
To a certain extent, what I've just talked about, I think, is critical. I will tell you one other thing, and that is, I don't know how many of you have heard of priority budgeting. My guess is if Lisa's here, Lisa has probably heard of that. There is a group, actually two men out of Colorado, I think, that came up with the concept of priority budgeting. And I actually did several work studies on priority budgeting. And then also in one of them brought in Kalamazoo city manager, because they had actually done that. It is labor intensive to go through that. But what that does is it helps an organization decide where you want to place your money. That's the easiest way to say it. But the idea is you exist because of the services that you provide as a local government. So the question is, what are the most important services and functions that you provide to your citizens, business people, and other stakeholders? And how you prioritize that should show up in where your money is placed. And so it is one of the things, even though with Cass County, we did not actually go through that whole strategy, nonetheless, we were very mindful of trying to think through putting together budgets, allocating dollars according to prioritizing the services. So how in the world do you prioritize? One of the simple answers to that is anything that is determined that a local government must provide by statute, obviously, that's one of the places you're going to dedicate some funds. So priority budgeting, I think, is something, it's a lens, if you will, through which I like to look at how we allocate our dollars. It is also keeping in touch with the gentleman for Lincoln Park that does your equalization so that we can be planning ahead. Third thing is, I actually like to head towards two-year budgets, if we can. It makes us think in a bigger vision rather than just a narrow one-year shot. And so it isn't that it is engraved in stone, but nonetheless, it gets us thinking and planning and thinking about how we're going to allocate the dollars that we believe we're going to have from a very conservative standpoint. So those are some of the things, along with some of the responses that I gave before.
Councilman Salcido, if you...
Number 7?
Go to number 7, yes.
What do you consider as essential in the relationship between a city manager and the city staff? And how will you facilitate a productive relationship with the city staff?
There really needs to be the development of a team feel. And I know that I said to a couple of folks this afternoon in meeting them, they hadn't asked the question, it's just that it's me, it's how I operate. And that is, I am very inclusive and I am extremely collaborative. I figure that the folks that you have hired into these key leadership positions and have been there for several years at least are there because they're good. And the thing is, I like to work in a very collegiate, collaborative sort of way. And so I'm not a micromanager. I expect them to come up with innovative solutions, ideas, and if that means that on our one-on-ones, we sit down and we begin to take a look at a strategy and maybe a strategic plan, at least for their department. What goals do they want to hit within the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And so what are the activities that we need to put in place that we need to begin to implement in order to make good on those deliverables? And so I think that there is a mutual respect piece that is inherent in treating others as the experts that come to the table in their own area of expertise. And so I think there's that. Second of all, I had mentioned earlier that I do meet with my leadership people one-on-one on a very regular basis. And it isn't for me to look over their shoulder so much as to make sure that we are strategizing appropriately, we are reaching goals, and we are actually adding new goals to the list, and that they are compatible with what the council is looking for. So those are some of the things, and it's just the way I operate.
Thank you. Councilman Parkinson, number 8, please.
What do you see as the city manager's role in communication with the press, public, and how specifically do you plan to be successful in communicating with our community?
I always think that it is critical that you have one person designated as the point person to deal with the media. And I have worked in communities where that is the city manager most of the times. It oftentimes is the city manager. I have also worked in 1, 2 locations where it was the mayor. And so it would be the city manager making sure that the mayor has all of the information that the mayor would need in order to effectively communicate with the press. And so either way, whatever would be the desire and the comfort level for this council, that's what we would work out and figure out how that works. And as far as communicating with the public, I see that a little bit differently. I'm kind of bifurcating that from the communication with the press. To me, communicating with the public takes many, many forms, particularly in light of what I said earlier. I'm big on trying to establish relationships with the business community because I think ultimately they can and we can leverage all of the resources that you have in this community and work together. And so that would be more of a one-on-one kind of role that I would take. And in certain circumstances, depending on whatever initiative we might be undertaking, it's certainly possible that we would hold 1 or more town halls. We want to make sure that they are a partner in what we're doing here. Buy-in is critical, and knowledge for the community is also critical.
All right. Thank you. Councilman Higgins, number 9, please.
What do you see as the city manager's role in, 1 second, that's, reading the same one again. Please describe the process you would utilize to recruit and select talent staff and the attention to making sure the candidate pool reflects the diversity of our community.
Obviously, I'd work hand in glove with the HR person, but it has been my experience to make sure that we are posting positions, first and foremost on our website, in local papers. I think that's critical, and then using any other opportunities that are available to us. And in certain instances, obviously, Michigan Municipal League provides a great service there and reaches a very broad audience, oftentimes far more than just regional, that's for sure. And that's what we want to do. And then review the pool that we have, and we always have, or at least I like to make sure that they are written, so that we always have the opportunity to continue it for maybe another 2 weeks if we don't think we have a candidate pool that really suits our needs. I have also gone through processes where there have been a review of those that are available and even some interviews with a decision made that we are going to reopen the candidate pool. And sometimes that's not just appropriate, but it's beneficial, because ultimately Lincoln Park wants the best that they can entice to come to Lincoln Park. The more minds that we have to tackle some of the issues, the better off the entire organization is, and of course, so is our community.
Thank you. Councilman Ross, 10th question, please.
Please describe a situation you've handled where the community faced a contentious issue with strong, diverging opinions, and what did you learn from this experience?
There are a couple I can think of, and one of the first ones that I mention actually is the historic courthouse. in Cass County. There was, and probably still is, a group of citizens that actually were adamant that the county not sell it, even though we had a developer that was ready, willing, and able, and that they not give it to, like, the land bank, because that certainly was another option. They wanted to make sure that that group had some control over what it was going to be used for. And so I can tell you that to begin with, not so much me, but some other folks that were wrestling with this, that had wrestled with it before I even got there, were a little outside their comfort zone, let's say, and not terribly pleased with this group because it seemed to make the decision pathway a little bit more difficult. And then there was two other people besides myself that said, no, wait a minute. They've thrown out a challenge. Let's take a look and get innovative. And so we did get innovative. And one of the things that we proposed is that it be transferred to the EDC and that ultimately there be placed a board, and some of those folks would be on that board to help steer the project. That met with wide acceptance by that group. And so, in my estimation, it's about recognizing that sometimes the pushback, it might feel like pushback, but sometimes it's really somebody saying, wait a minute, try to think about this in a different sort of way. And so it challenges us to be innovative problem solvers. And so that's probably one of the best examples I've got.
Councilman Kelsey, question number 11.
Sure.
please.
How would you describe your management and leadership style? Please identify both strengths and weaknesses related to your style, please.
I had talked just a little bit about this before, but I'm going to start out by saying I'm not a micromanager. I am a collaborator. I always find that the more communication leads to more innovative ideas. I don't come here claiming to have all the answers. What I do claim is that I can work with those that you have in places of leadership to reach some solutions, and then I can help map out the pathway strategies to actually get those to happen. So from a management standpoint, I am not the crack the whip kind of individual. I am very inclusive, I'm very collaborative, because I just see that as the better road to take. And communication, of course, is always key. So I guess I'm inclusive, collaborative, however you want to label it, that's me.
Okay. Councilman Salcido, number 12, please.
Yes. Please describe the largest challenge the community had when you first started in one of your prior professional positions. How did you go about assessing and addressing the challenge?
Oh, which one? There really are a number of them. The one that comes to mind is e-course. And e-course, it has several tentacles. Let's just put it that way. So coming in and realizing that a scheme had been in the works, and that 60, count them, 60 individuals in a DPW capacity had been laid off, and a structure was put in place where you had the person, the mayor, deal with two of his friends and create a whole new entity and then bill the city at twice the amount, a little over twice the amount, that it actually cost to put forward and accomplish the tasks involved with DPW. So coming in and having that situation, and then add to that you had a financial comptroller that had been a part of that, and while I was there, he was already gone. But what we discovered is he was collecting unemployment. And I said, not happening. And there is a provision, as you may know, that disallows that when you have somebody that is collecting when they've engaged in some criminal conduct. So I took all the necessary steps. I actually not ran because there was an administrative law judge that ran the hearing, but I said, I'm doing this, and we won. And so not only did we cut off his benefits, but he had to repay the city all of the benefits that he had erroneously been receiving, shouldn't have. And you had I got notice, I think the day before, that the mayor was going to court for sentencing. And part of the reason for only getting it the day before is the mail system in eCourse was not straightforward. It would get delayed by certain people. And so, quite by accident, I learned and made a run for it the next day down to federal court. And I had put together as fast as I could a bit of a spreadsheet of everything that I could document, and I asked for restitution. I said that this was just a small piece of what had, in essence, been stolen from this city. And so I was successful in having the court, the federal judge, order a $50,000 restitution that had to be paid back. So there were those parts, but then the greater global part to all of this, quite frankly, was a total disconnect between the governance piece and organization and the community. The community had been left out for so long and for so many years, and that truly is what prompted us to actually go to Michigan Municipal League and say, there is an issue like we've never seen before, and we want to figure out how do we bring this together? How do we hand back to the citizens their government? And so that became Envision eCourse ultimately. Very successful. I don't know where it is today, but that again was a very dynamic movement that allowed the citizens for the first time to actually understand what their role could be in that local government. So that's one of them.
Councilman Parkinson, the 13th question.
How would you approach the development of a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for the city? Once established, how would you facilitate the execution of such a plan?
Oh, right up my alley. Thank you. It's what I think every city government needs to do. And I think that there are a number of professionals out there, organizations, vendors, that can provide outstanding leadership to actually put together a strategic plan. And there is the alternative is to let me do it. And I think that I could probably put something together based on my experience with developing strategic plans. Here's the thing, and I'm so glad you added that last piece to the question. What I have seen in so many communities, as a matter of fact, just about every community I've gone into has said, oh yeah, I think in 2005 we did a strategic plan. Oh, where is it? I really don't know. And so that's oftentimes what happens with strategic plans. Not the way I do it. As far as I'm concerned, and what I circulated was, I think it is critical that after the governance body is satisfied that that represents the goals that you want to deliver on, then it is about, on a quarterly basis, seeing how are we doing. And one of the things that we started in e-course, which I kind of liked, and there are certainly a number of options, but one of the things that we talked about was actually in the e-course chambers beginning to, at least on a yearly basis, if not a bi-yearly basis, you actually put up on your walls what you've accomplished so that it telegraphs to your entire community, we're not sitting on what you have provided, your input, and what has been determined as the goals that we want to reach. We are delivering on them. And so I'm a big fan of strategic plans. I think it helps prioritize what you want to accomplish and then gives you that clear North Star vision as to what direction the city needs to forge paths in.
Councilman Higgins, the 14th question.
Community involvement is important to a city. Please describe how you would plan to personally become involved in the community.
You've got something there that is just one example of the community engagement pieces that I have done in the last 3 communities I've been in. All 3 have been very successful. They've all been a little bit different, but they've all been very successful. So I'm going to go back and make mention of the fact that in those 90 days or after those 90 days, as I'm sitting down talking with each of you, each of our key leadership folks, to determine what issues they see, what directions are possible, et cetera, then I do go out and start identifying business leaders. And I sit down with them to gain a better knowledge of what they would like to see in the community, what they'd be willing to do. And part of that is working towards doing a community engagement because, particularly with Cass County, the end result of that was not only having over 200 people show up at each of these gatherings, but it was the feeling that there was a movement. This wasn't just a dart game, where it's kind of the single dart and that's it. This was a movement, and we got, as a matter of fact, I had dinner with a couple of times the CEO of the biggest utility company in that region, and got them on board. They became folks that ponied up some dollars to help in that community engagement process. So I see that as critical for Lincoln Park, and that would be something that I would want to do. I don't do that when I first come in the door because there has to be those relationship paths that need to be built over a period of time, and then we begin to launch into that.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ross, question 15.
Nationally, the average city manager tenure is 4 years. If selected as our next city manager, what do you predict your tenure would be?
I have not a clue. I'm going to say that in talking with an executive search person for Michigan Municipal League, she has indicated the same thing, and she has been a city manager in many, many communities in Illinois as well as Michigan. And one of the things that appear to be a consistent is that oftentimes the more successful that community is, oftentimes the shorter the time span. And we have discussed this a couple of times, and I'm not sure what the translation of all of that is. I don't know. So I have no idea. But here's the other thing. I'm rambling a little, sorry. And that is, I have never felt, nor has it been my experience, that the length of time equates to success. I think those are two vastly different concepts. And I think we make a mistake when we tie one to the other. And so if Lincoln Park is telling me, we want to move ahead, we want to write a new chapter, we would like to write a whole new book, I'm in. I am not somebody that can sit on the sidelines and simply do babysitting. I don't do that. I'm like a governance body that wants to achieve. And it's one of the reasons why I sit down and talk with you and ask you, why did you run in the first place? What is it you want to accomplish? How can I help you reach that? And so that's what you're going to get with me. I have no idea what that means in terms of years. I think that's a totally different question. If you're talking about success and making good on deliverables and finding Lincoln Park's sweet spot to move ahead and write a whole new chapter, I'm in.
Karen, in finishing up here, give you an opportunity for 3 to 5 minutes to describe why you should be our next city manager candidate, why you should be our next city manager.
Well, you have my resume there, and that gives you an outline of everything that I've been able to accomplish, and in many instances accomplish in fairly short periods of time, but very successful. And in some cases, it really has transformed communities. And I will tell you that the community engagement piece has the probability of changing and transitioning a community. And it's happened in other communities. It can happen here in Lincoln Park. I have no idea how I stack up to the other two. All three of us would not be here unless we bring a fair amount to the table. I'm assuming you're looking for the best fit. And so if I'm the best fit, I'm a great cheerleader, and I get things done, and I work with you hand in glove. If that's what you're looking for, then I'm your person. Other than that, I'm not sure how else to tackle the comparatives, because I don't know exactly what you're looking for. And sometimes when you're sitting where you're sitting, it's a feel. It's a determination. How is this going to fit? Oh my gosh, this woman comes with awful high energy. Do we really want that level of energy? And so those are some of the things that I know you have to decide. All I can tell you is I have worked in the downriver communities, and I get the fact that it has its own flavor, it has its own profile, and every one of those communities has its own personality, and you're proud of it. Thank goodness you are. And we can build on that. I understand that, and that kind of hits me at my sweet spot, too. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
And James will be...
I will bring the next candidate, so let's not take